iCUE can seem like a pretty intimidating piece of software, but once you have a basic understanding of how it works, figuring out the details is actually fairly easy. Just shy of 2 years ago, I made a beginner's guide iCUE lighting tutorial which showed how to customize the lighting on your Corsair peripherals. In that video, I completely ignored the actions section, so I figured it's about time I made an actions tutorial as well, showing how to create macros, as well as do some other functions. Just like with the lighting, the first thing we need to do is create a profile. To do that, we'll need to click the plus sign here in the profiles box. We'll then need to scroll down in our profile list to our newly created profile and click on this pencil icon here. And then we can name it whatever we want. For this video, I'm just going to name this one Example. The reason you may want more than one profile is so you can have different lighting schemes for your peripherals to suit your mood or for different applications you use or games that you play. Once we have our profile created, we'll click on the Actions tab here just below. To create a new action, we'll click the plus sign here, and the first option we have is to create a macro. Now, I don't play any games that require me to use macros, but for people that play MOBAs and stuff, this is something that can help a lot, I imagine. To create a macro, you'll first click the Record Macro button down here, and then type the keys you want pressed for your macro. You'll then want to assign that macro to a key on your keyboard by clicking on the key that you want to trigger that macro. There are several options off to the side here you may or may not want enabled depending on what you're wanting to do. In this window, it describes when a key is pressed, when it's released, and how long to pause between each of these. Now, if you don't want iCUE to record these delays to begin with, you can untick this box here. If you've already recorded your macro and want to remove the delays, you can delete them one at a time if there's specific delays you want to remove, or you can press this button here and remove all of them at once. With the keyboard events box here checked, iCUE will record every key press you make. If you uncheck it, then it will not register any keyboard inputs as part of your macro. You can even have your mouse clicks, wheel scrolls, and mouse movements as part of a macro too. To enable recording of those things, you just need to make sure their boxes are checked here. As for all of the buttons along the bottom of the window here, they're all for modifying your macro once you've recorded it. This first button is to insert a new event, which is a way to manually input additional mouse or keyboard inputs or delays. The next button allows you to edit an event if for some reason you need to change it. Then you have copy, paste, and undo. This button allows you to add a delay between all the events in the macro. You can choose a constant delay time or a random delay between two values that you choose. We then have the Delete All Delays button, the Delete Selected Event button, and finally the Delete All Events button. Under the Advanced Settings tab, you can choose when you want your macro to trigger. So when the assigned key is pressed, when it's released, while it's being pressed, or it can be set to toggle. This box to the right allows you to execute the macro without interruption, which just means you can press another key while the macro is still executing and it won't mess your macro up. Below that, we can choose if we want the macro to repeat or not. And if it's going to repeat, then we can choose how many times we want it to repeat and the amount of delay between. The second action dropdown allows you to trigger another action at the same time. You'll first have to create another action and then select it here in the second action dropdown. The last box here to retain the original key output does just that, as long as this box is checked. Moving to the Start Settings tab, Here you can assign any audio file you have on your PC to play when you press your action key. And the lighting dropdown allows for a custom lighting effect to play. To do that, you'll have to go into the lighting tab on the left here and create a custom lighting effect. As far as I can tell, this only works if you choose solid, gradient, ripple, or wave. None of the other effects seem to work for this. If you need more help with customizing the lighting effects, please check out my other iCUE tutorial video where I go over the lighting in depth. A link for that video is popping up in the cards right now, and I've also linked it in the video description. As for right now, I'm just showing how to get a lighting effect to play with an action. Once you have your effect created, it will show up in the drop down here and you can select it. Now when you press your macro key, it will also play your custom lighting effect as well. Okay, moving on from the macro action. The next action on the list is text. This action is pretty straightforward for the most part. Here you can type in a text message which you can assign to a single key. In a game like Rocket League or something, this may come in handy when you feel like the quick chat messages don't quite convey what you're feeling at the moment. To set one up, all you need to do is click in the box here and type in the message that you want. The buttons at the bottom are copy, cut, paste, undo, redo, and delete. If you want a delay between characters so your text looks like it's being typed out, you can set whatever you want the delay to be in milliseconds right here. In the Advanced tab, you can set a second action to take place at the same time, just like we talked about when we covered the macro action. And then there's the checkbox here if you want the key you've assigned the action to retain its original output function. Start settings here is very similar to how it was in the macro action as well, so I'm not going to go over it in depth this time around, but just like with macro, you can assign a sound to play when you execute the action as well as set a custom lighting effect to play with it. Moving on to the media action, the K95, along with several other Corsair keyboards, already have dedicated media keys, but this action may be useful if you have a keyboard like the K60, which does not have media control keys. For this example, I'm going to program some of my F keys. Let's start by clicking the media stop, and I'm going to assign that to F9. For the next key, we'll need to add another action by clicking the plus sign here at the action tab, and then click the drop down that says macro, select media, and then I'm going to pick previous track and assign that to F10. I'll then repeat this process for all the media keys I want to assign, and once we've finished up, you'll have a fully functioning set of media keys you can use for playing back music and videos and stuff. This time around, the advanced settings only allow you to retain the original key output, and the start settings allows us to assign a sound and lighting effect, just like we've seen with our other actions. This next action to launch application, I think is a pretty cool one. If you have applications you use frequently, this allows you to launch those applications with the press of a single button. As you can see, we have several Windows default apps here we can assign. There's File Explorer, Calculator, Text Editor, Mail, and your web browser. I use Google Chrome as my default web browser, but if you use Edge or Firefox or something else, you should be able to select your browser of choice in the drop down here. You'll then need to assign the action to a key on your keyboard or mouse, and now when you press that key, it will launch your web browser. You can take it one step further too and paste in the URL of a particular website in this field to the right, and now when you press that key, not only will it launch your web browser, it will take you to that website. As for the top box here, you can use this one to select any application you have on your PC. For example, let's say I want to be able to launch Handbrake. I'd click the three dots button here and then navigate to the executable file for Handbrake. Click open, and now when I press the assign key, Handbrake will launch. Okay, so this next action is the timer action, and it's one that I've had some trouble with. I'm pretty sure I am setting it up correctly and everything, but getting it to actually show up on screen is what I've been having problems with. I've spent hours and hours researching online to get this thing to work without any luck at all so far. I'm going to run you through what I do know, however, and hopefully it'll work for you, or maybe you can help me figure out what I'm doing wrong. Anyway, the first thing that you're going to need to do for this is to go up to the top to settings. And in this field here, you'll click on OSD, which stands for on-screen display. In this overlays dropdown, you'll want to select active timer countdown and then check this box to enable it. You'll then have some options to change the font, the color of the font, change the background, and the transparency of the OSD. One thing I'm not totally sure about is how this OSD applications list works, because I've tried adding the applications I want the timer to show up in to this list, as well as not adding any applications to it at all. And so far, no matter what I do, I haven't been able to get the timer to show up anywhere. There is this warning here that says not all applications may support OSD, so maybe I just don't have any apps that this works with, or I'm completely misunderstanding this. Again, if you know what I'm doing wrong, please leave a comment and let me know. Anyway, you drag the timer window and position it where you want it to show up on your screen, and then you can click back on actions here to set it up. To set the amount of time, sadly, the only way to adjust this is by clicking the arrows in each of the fields here. And then you can select what happens when you press the key you assign the timer to. You can have it continue with the countdown or have it start over. In the Advanced tab, we can select when to trigger the action and whether we want it to repeat or not. If we set it to repeat, then we can set the number of times to repeat the action, as well as set a constant or random repeat delay. And the last option here is to retain the original key output. The Start tab is just like we've seen with other actions, allowing us to assign a sound to play when the action is executed, as well as assign a lighting effect and add another simultaneous action. The Stop tab has all of the same options on it as the Start tab, so you can assign whatever you'd like here as well. The Disable action is a pretty straightforward one. It simply allows you to disable any key on your keyboard or button on your mouse. I have a bit of a bad habit of hitting the N and B keys with my left thumb when I'm playing games that use the spacebar for things. So this allows me to disable those keys, so if I accidentally hit them, then it doesn't bring up a menu or whatever else those keys do in that game. Of course, disabling those keys means I'm unable to bring those menus up if I need them, but you can always assign those to other keys in the game's menu if you want, or you can toggle this option to only disable the key or keys when the Windows lock button is on. The next action on the list is profile switching. This allows you to cycle through your different iCUE profiles at the touch of a button, rather than having to bring up iCUE and select it. As with all our other actions, we need to select a key to assign this action to. And down here, we have some options that we can play with. The default is to switch to the next profile in the list, but you can have it switch to the previous profile if you want, or have it switch directly to a specific profile. To select a specific profile, you just click the drop down and select the profile you want it to switch to. You can also toggle the while pressed option here so that it will switch to that profile while you're holding the assigned key, but then switch back to the profile you're using once the key is released. Now let's go back to the switch to next profile from list. Here on the right is where we can build our profile rotation list. If you go all the way over to the right, we have a list of all the different profiles I've created, and we can add and remove profiles to our list using the add and remove buttons here. Once we have our list finalized, we can choose if we want it to loop the list or not by toggling this box here. These profile selection buttons will show either all the profiles you have created or only the profiles located in the same folder as each other. Up here on the Profiles tab, if you click these three lines, you can choose to create a folder to organize your profiles in whatever way that you want. My Nightsword mouse and K95 keyboard have different profiles you can save to the peripherals themselves, and I've chosen to group those into their own folder here. Since the example profile we created for this video is grouped with all my other custom profiles and not these hardware profiles, when I toggle in folder only, then only my custom profiles are selectable here. The last button on this page is the Assign button here, which is super nice to have, as it allows you to add this profile switching action to all the profiles in your rotation list all at once, rather than having to go into each profile individually and add it to each one. In the Advanced Setting tab, once again, we can toggle to retain the original key output or not, and in the Start Settings tab, we can select a sound effect to play if we want whenever we switch profiles. Okay, now we're on to the other half of the action menu, which is for remapping buttons. I'm only going to look at a couple of these because the options are really the same on all of them. They're just organized into different sets of keys and buttons. If we select the A through Z keys here, this will allow us to assign any of the letter keys on the keyboard to any other key on the keyboard or even button on a Corsair mouse. In 2014, I severed the median nerve in my left arm due to a work-related accident. And since that time, I have very little to no feeling really in my left middle finger, index finger, and thumb. I'm still able to game, but with no feeling in 3 of the 5 fingers on my left hand, it does make it a little difficult to know what keys I'm pressing all the time. In many games, the E key is commonly used for interacting with different objects or to pick up weapons and what have you. To make this easier for me, I like to assign the E key here to the sniper button on my mouse. So to do that, I need to click the plus sign here to create a new action. I then select the A through Z keys from the drop down here and select the letter E and then click on Sniper. This now allows me to use my right thumb, which has full normal feeling, to perform this action rather than me fumbling around for it with my left index finger. You can also have a single button press imitate holding a key if you want, and you can set how long of a press to imitate. The other option is to toggle, so it will imitate holding the key until you press the key again. This time under Advanced, the only option that we have here is to retain the original key output. As you can see here, you can remap any key on your keyboard to function as any other key. You can even map mouse buttons to your keyboard, or vice versa. The very last remap option is for a keystroke. Using this, you can make keyboard shortcuts for things like cut, copy, paste, undo, bold, underline, or whatever else, even shorter. Rather than having to press Control and X to cut, you can assign a keystroke action to do that with a single key press instead. Okay, I think I better cut this off here. I hope the video has helped you get a little better understanding of how iCUE works. I know that as you play around with it, you'll get more and more comfortable with it, and will be able to customize things to work just how you want them to. I've reviewed more than a few Corsair iCUE compatible peripherals on the channel over the years, and if there's any of them that you're interested in purchasing, please check out my Amazon store at the link in the video description. I am an Amazon affiliate, so Amazon pays me a small commission on items you purchase from my store, and that money helps me continue making content like this here on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you in another video real soon. We'll catch you later.